My boyfriend and I were visiting a few friends in Richmond, Virginia. We went with another couple and decided to get an Airbnb. The other couple that we went with picked out the Airbnb, but they hadn't really been to RVA before. So the place they picked was about 15 minutes outside of the city center. A bit of a pain in the ass, but not a big deal. The neighborhood was nice and the house was okay. When we got into the house, it seemed I can't really describe it. It was nice enough. We were only staying for a weekend, and the owner left us some banana bread, but there was just this odd vibe to it, a bit of a creepy vibe. For example, when I put our stuff in our bedroom, I opened up the closet, and there was nothing in it but a chair. Not like a fold-up chair, but like a small child's chair, facing the bed from the closet. No hangers, no other linens, no towels, just this small chair in an empty closet. I know that hearing it doesn't sound creepy, but I promise you it was weird. I brushed it off and we decided to settle in, and then go and meet up with some friends in the city. Day turned into night. We all had a bit to drink, and decided to call it an evening at around 1:30 a.m. The four of us headed back to the house and went to bed. Usually when I drink, there is nothing in the world that will wake me up. My head hits the pillow, and that is where I will remain until the sun comes up. So I don't know why it didn't happen this particular night. Maybe it was the feel of the house, but I woke up at around 3 a.m. to a quiet giggle, like a grown man's giggle. I thought maybe my boyfriend was just giggling in his sleep, but then the giggling started getting louder, and it sounded like it was coming from outside our window. The window was located behind the bed, above our heads, so I quietly snuck up to see if I could see anything. Nothing. There was no one out there, but it went quiet and the giggling had stopped. So I was about to just go back to sleep, but then it started back up again. This time I knew it wasn't my boyfriend, and I knew it wasn't the other couple. The giggling grew louder and louder, until it was just full-blown hysterical laughter, right outside our window at 3 a.m. I felt my boyfriend's hand clench mine. I didn't even know he was awake. I asked him, "Did you bring your gun?" "No, but I have my knife," he said. He asked if I saw anything out there, and I said no. The laughing stopped after about 15 minutes, and we stayed up until about 4 a.m., looking outside the window, making sure that laughter didn't come back. We finally went back to sleep. When we woke up the next morning, we asked the couple if they heard anything, and they said no. In fact, they thought we were crazy. One of them suggested that I dreamt it, but how did my boyfriend and I both dream that there was some random person laughing their heads off outside of our bedroom window? I can't tell what's creepier, to be honest. The fact that we heard that at 3 a.m. in this creepy house right next to our window, or that when I looked outside there was nothing there. I guess you can chalk up my not being able to see it to maybe this person being directly under our window. But why would someone do that? Why would someone just stay for 15 minutes outside of a house, giggling and laughing, and then just, presumably, leave? Nothing happened after that. We went back home, but to this day my boyfriend and I still bring it up as one of the creepiest things to ever happen to us. In the year 2018, 3 of my friends and I, all in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was affordable, and we had the time, so why not? Our itinerary included sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting beach bars, basically a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful, and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip was with some of the locals. Drugs were really prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with people eager to sell us drugs. I am not exaggerating when I say this. One guy even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off while my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I might be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce on me, much like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't feel too afraid since we were confident that we could handle them, as half of them were not even sober. However, that was only the tip of the iceberg. The horror began when we returned to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning and were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap, and it didn't even have a proper locking mechanism for the door. It had 2 wooden doors that swung inwards, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it did the job, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick instead, since we didn't have anything that fit the holes to wedge the door closed. We turned in for the night, seemingly not expecting any issues, as we had already stayed there for 6 days with no problems. I woke up to strange clicking sounds in the dead of the night. I got out of my bed and thought maybe it was one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all sleeping, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them, feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of the night? I noticed the doors were slightly open, and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside and saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push the doors open. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions, as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation, as I recognized one of the men. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnbs and pathways during the day, so there was no reason for him to be there at 3 a.m. The other guy asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they allegedly found it outside our Airbnb. I definitely smelled something fishy, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my friends, and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances, and we stayed up until morning came in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report the incident to the reception, but the description I gave them didn't match theirs. They told me the housekeepers they hired consisted of only females in their late 30s and 40s. This sent shivers down our spines as we realized that we had let a complete imposter into and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost, and we got out of the situation safely. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't wake up on that fateful night, as the doors were close to being opened. I was just grateful that it was our last night there. My heart pounded as I pulled up to the address I had found on Airbnb. The listing seemed perfect. A cozy cabin nestled deep in the woods, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. I was looking forward to a peaceful weekend getaway, but what unfolded was far from the perfect retreat I had envisioned. As I arrived at the cabin, I noticed that the exterior looked a bit more weathered and worn than the photos had suggested. Still, I brushed it off, thinking it might just be the rustic charm I was seeking. The key was hidden in a lockbox as instructed, and I let myself in. The interior was eerily dim, with a musty smell that hit me immediately. I flicked on the lights, revealing a space that was cluttered and dusty, far from the pristine, cozy cabin I had seen online. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, convincing myself that it was just a bit of neglect from the host. I made my way to the bedroom, only to find the sheets rumpled and the bed unmade. It was as if someone had just left in a hurry. The unease intensified as I explored further. In the bathroom, the tiles were cracked, and the shower was barely functional. It felt like a place abandoned long ago. Hoping for some comfort, I decided to check out the kitchen to make a cup of tea. The cupboards were practically bare, save for a few dusty, expired items. I couldn't find any tea or coffee, and the refrigerator was empty except for a half-empty bottle of ketchup. The isolation of the cabin left me feeling stranded, and it seemed like I had to fend for myself in the middle of nowhere. Things took a bizarre turn when I noticed a locked door in the back of the cabin. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to ask the host about it. I reached for my phone to find that there was no cell signal, and the Wi-Fi mentioned in the listing was non-existent. Panic set in as I realized I had no way to contact anyone. Feeling vulnerable and isolated, I decided to spend the night and deal with it in the morning. I locked myself in the bedroom, which had a window overlooking the woods. It was impossible to shake the feeling of being watched, and every creak and rustle outside made my heart race. As the night wore on, strange sounds echoed throughout the cabin, as if someone, or something, was moving about. I mustered the courage to investigate and found the locked door in the back of the cabin was ajar. The room behind it was filled with bizarre and unsettling objects, including old photographs and what appeared to be occult symbols scrawled on the walls. My mind was racing with fear, and I couldn't make sense of what I had stumbled upon. With no other option, I decided to pack my things and leave at first light. I barely slept, and the morning couldn't come soon enough. I quickly gathered my belongings and headed for the door. That's when I heard footsteps outside the bedroom. My heart raced, and I knew I had to escape. I grabbed my bag, flung open the window, and made a run for it. I sprinted through the woods until I reached a main road, where I flagged down a passing car and explained my harrowing experience. I never looked back at that cabin, and I contacted Airbnb to report the situation. They were quick to take down the listing and offered me a full refund. It was a terrifying experience, one that left me scarred and wary of ever booking another Airbnb. That weekend getaway had turned into a nightmarish adventure, and I couldn't help but wonder who or what lurked in that remote cabin. It's a story I'll never forget, a stark reminder that sometimes the darkest horrors can be found in the most unexpected places.